Welcome to Sleep Stories for Restless Minds. Tonight we begin a gentle journey through winding hours, quiet towns, and forgotten futures. In the Clockmaker's atlas, time isn't something you chase, it's something you find in the spaces between. So close your eyes, take a breath, and follow the thread. Tavi wasn't supposed to be out that morning. The fog had rolled in early, thicker than usual, blanketing the cobblestone streets in a hush so heavy it softened the sound of her own footsteps. She wandered slowly, hands deep in her coat pockets, not really looking for anything, just hoping the stillness might show her something new. It did. Tucked between two shuttered bakeries and half covered in ivy was a narrow, bowed door. The kind of door that looked more like a memory than a structure. Chipped green paint, a crooked brass handle, and above it, in fading script, Isherwood Timepieces Estate. No year, just question marks. Tavi squinted, then knocked once, lightly, like the door might be asleep. It creaked open before she could knock again. Inside was a dim golden world, a place of ticking and whirring, of soft chimes and gentle gears. It smelled of old wood and lemon polish, and the light came not from lamps but from lanterns shaped like moons and stars. In the middle of it all stood a man. Tall, thin, wrapped in a dark blue vest and a coat the color of dusk. His hair was mostly silver, curled at the edges like parchment, and his hands were busy winding a clock that looked more like a seashell than anything that told time. He didn't look up when she entered. "Early," he said softly, his voice worn like soft leather. "Didn't expect the fog to bring anyone before tea." Tavi blinked. "I didn't mean to. I was just walking." The man nodded without turning. That's usually how these things start. He finished winding the seashell clock and finally looked up. His eyes were pale blue, clear, and very quiet, like they'd seen time both moving and standing still. "You've got a question," he said. "Most people do, even if they don't know it yet." Tavi hesitated. "Are you Mr. Isherwood?" The man gave a gentle bow. "Of course I am, and you've arrived just in time." He turned, reached under the counter, and pulled out a book. No, not a book. A map, but not just any map. It shimmered at the edges, moved slightly when she didn't look directly at it. The towns were drawn in curves instead of grids. Some roads looped in on themselves, others blinked in and out of sight like fireflies. "This," he said, "is the Atlas of Time." Tavi leaned closer. "It's not finished," Mr. Isherwood added, "but I think if you're willing, we might continue it together." Tavi didn't answer right away. She just stared at the map. And somewhere in her chest, behind her ribs, a soft tick began to echo. Not her heartbeat. Something else. Something curious. Something old. Something just beginning. Tavi sat on a high stool near the counter, legs swinging slowly. Mr. Isherwood had spread the map across the table like a fragile secret. It made a soft sound when it moved, like turning pages in a story you'd read once in a dream. She reached out and touched one of the towns drawn near the center. Its name shimmered faintly. "Stillmere." "What happens there?" she asked. Mr. Isherwood peered over the rim of a magnifying glass. "Ah, Stillmere. That's a quiet one. Time there moves only when someone speaks aloud." Tavi tilted her head. "So if no one talks, everything pauses. Completely. Birds in mid-flight, water in mid-pour, a town of hush waiting for a voice." She blinked. "Is that real?" Mr. Isherwood gave a little shrug. "What's real is often just what's felt long enough. This atlas doesn't record places. It records rhythms." He tapped a curled finger on another part of the parchment. The spot shimmered gently, then cleared to reveal a town drawn in soft blue spirals. Nesslithram. Tavi leaned closer. "That one," he said, "runs backwards from sunset to sunrise. You can't visit unless you're ready to see something you've already done, but not quite the way you remember it." Tavi sat back, her mind buzzing softly. "It's all so strange," she said. Mr. Isherwood smiled. "Strange to the clock on your wall, not to the one in your chest." He moved to the back of the shop, shelves creaking under the weight of countless small machines. Somewhere behind a stack of sandglass clocks, he rummaged until he returned with something wrapped in velvet. He set it before her. "This belonged to my mentor," he said. "Passed it to me when I was your age. It's not a compass." He unwrapped it. Inside was a small egg-sized device. Gears turned inside it, even though it had no visible key. In the center, a light pulsed once every few seconds, not like a ticking clock, but more like breathing. "This is your guide," he said. "It doesn't tell you where to go. It tells you when you've arrived." Tavi looked up. "You want me to come with you?" Mr. Isherwood's smile barely curved, but it was warm. "I want to find the rest of the towns, and I'm too old to travel through time alone." Tavi looked again at the map, then at the breathing device, then at the door where the fog still pressed gently against the glass. Her legs stopped swinging, and she said simply, "Okay." They didn't pack bags. Mr. Isherwood simply locked the shop with an old brass key and slipped it into the breast pocket of his coat, as if he meant to return, but not quite soon. Tavi carried the velvet-wrapped guide in both hands, holding it the way one holds a sleeping bird, careful not to disturb its rhythm. It pulsed softly with a gentle, steady glow warm through the cloth. The fog hadn't lifted, but it no longer felt cold. It curled around their ankles like misty thread, tugging them forward down a street that seemed to stretch longer than it ever had before. "Where are we going?" she asked. Mr. Isherwood glanced at the guide. "Wherever this starts to hum louder." He paused at the end of the lane. Where there had once been only a tall iron gate, there was now an archway of thin stone carved with spirals, symbols that hadn't been there the day before. Tavi squinted, watching as the fog parted gently beneath the arch. Beyond it, not the next street, not the next town, something else. A field full of glimmering lines like threads floating just above the ground. Some pulsed softly, others shimmered blue or gold or lilac, and each led somewhere. Mr. Isherwood stepped through the archway, boots clicking gently against the stone. Tavi followed, holding the guide close. "This," he said, gesturing to the field, "is the thread path. Which thread do we take?" He looked at the guide again. Its light pulsed twice, quickly, and the smallest hum escaped it like a bell behind a closed door. "That one," he said, pointing to a thread of pale green that shimmered like leaves in moonlight. Tavi reached toward it. It bent toward her fingertips like it recognized her. And the moment she touched it, the moment she felt it, the world shifted. Not in a flash, not in a spin, but in a soft fold, like turning the page of a book you didn't remember picking up. And when it unfolded again, they were standing in a town they had never seen before. But somehow it already felt familiar. The town had no name at its entrance. No gate. No signs. No clocks. Just a row of tall trees with deep green leaves, all gently turned toward the road like they were watching or waiting. Tavi stepped lightly, eyes wide. Everything felt still. Too still. There were no birds in the sky. No footsteps on the stone. No voices. Not even wind. "Where are we?" she whispered. Mr. Isherwood scanned the space carefully, his hands tucked behind his back. He didn't answer right away. He tilted his head as if listening. And then he nodded. "Ah, we're in Quietmere." Tavi looked around. "Is that a real name?" "It is now," he said. "Every town we visit becomes real the moment it's felt." They continued walking. The buildings were simple, their doors open, their windows wide, but no one looked out, no one moved inside. There were people, frozen mid-gesture. A woman reaching toward a lantern. A boy paused at the lip of a fountain, fingers almost touching the water. A man in the bakery doorway, one foot lifted, never quite falling. All of them perfectly still, not afraid, not sad. Just waiting. Tavi clutched the guide a little tighter. "Are they okay?" Mr. Isherwood nodded. "Perfectly. Time here doesn't stop on its own." "Then why isn't it moving?" He glanced at her. "Because no one's spoken yet." Tavi looked at the townsfolk. The man at the bakery had a tiny smile on his lips. The boy near the fountain had water droplets suspended midair. It didn't feel scary. Felt suspended, like a held breath before a song begins. "Go on, Mr. Isherwood said, stepping back. "Say something. Anything." Tavi looked around, unsure. Then, after a moment, she softly said, "Hello?" It echoed like wind through a canyon. A soft shift ran through the town. The water in the fountain fell. The man's foot landed. The woman lit the lantern. And the people blinked, not confused, not startled, just aware. As if they had always been in the middle of a conversation, simply paused politely for someone to join. A young girl near the corner shop turned toward Tavi and smiled. "You must be new," she said. "Welcome to the moment." Tavi looked to Mr. Isherwood, who nodded. "They call it the moment here," he said quietly, "because they only move inside one. Each word creates the next breath. Each breath creates the next step." Tavi watched the town come to life, slowly, softly. No rushing, no multitasking. Each person did one thing at a time, fully. It was the most peaceful kind of movement she had ever seen. And for the first time in a long while, she stopped thinking about what came next. Tavi stayed longer than she meant to in the moment. Not because she had to. Because it felt like the kind of place where leaving too quickly would be rude. Like walking out of a conversation while someone was still telling you something important. She and Mr. Isherwood sat outside the small tea shop near the center of town. The table was made of soft stone, warm from the morning sun. Every so often, a gentle breeze passed, not often enough to disturb, just enough to remind. The townsfolk moved deliberately, each gesture smooth and unhurried. There were no clocks on any of the walls, no chimes, no countdowns. Time didn't tick here. It flowed. A man poured tea into a cup, then paused with his hand on the pot, waiting for the next word before continuing. Tavi whispered, "Thank you," and he finished the pour. Mr. Isherwood sipped from a tiny green cup. In the moment, time is created through acknowledgement. Every word you say is a key. Every silence is a door. Tavi looked across the square where two children were playing a game of catch, but they didn't run. They passed the ball like it was a conversation. One throw, one catch, one smile. Nothing more. It was beautiful. "Do they ever rush?" she asked. Mr. Isherwood shook his head. "There's no need. Nothing gets away from you when time waits to be invited." Later, a woman with a long scarf and soft voice handed Tavi a folded paper. No explanation, just a nod. Inside was a small spiral, drawn with thick charcoal lines. Beneath it, written in warm, careful handwriting, "Moments aren't measured by size, only by attention." Tavi folded it again and tucked it into her coat pocket. It felt heavier than paper, not in weight, in meaning. They left just after sundown. There were no goodbyes, only glances and quiet nods, like the town itself was saying you were here. "That's enough." Back on the thread path, the guide in Tavi's hand pulsed softly. "Do you think we'll come back?" she asked. Mr. Isherwood watched the mist part ahead of them. "Maybe, but whether we do or not, a part of us never left." And with that, they stepped onto the next thread, one that glowed faintly orange, like a sunset caught in memory. The next thread felt different. It didn't hum like the others. It murmured, soft and slow, like someone speaking in their sleep. Tavi held the guide tightly as they walked. Around them, the thread path shimmered with dusky light. The mist thickened, then thinned, and then quite suddenly, they stepped into Samna. Or at least, the town called itself that in the corner of its stone gate. A word carved in cursive, then gently blurred by moss as though even the stone was beginning to forget. But this town was not asleep. It was resting. Each window glowed with soft amber light. Each rooftop curved slightly inward as though cradling dreams. The streets were lined with low, flowering trees that gave off the faint scent of lavender and something older, like old books left open on a desk. Tavi noticed something right away. No one was moving. Not frozen like in Quietmere. just peacefully still, slumped gently in hammocks strung between porches, curled in soft chairs by open windows, heads resting on arms, breath slow and calm. And above them, gently swirling in the air, were dreams. Not images, not visions, but glimmers. Faint threads of gold and violet drifting upward like smoke disappearing into the evening sky. Mr. Isherwood motioned toward a bench. We won't find answers here until we rest. Tavi blinked. But we just got here. Exactly, he said. That's the rule. Insomnia, time only passes while you dream. She hesitated. What happens if I don't fall asleep? He smiled gently. Then the sun never rises. And indeed, though the sky was dusky and soft, it had been that way since they'd arrived. Tavi sat down slowly, the bench wrapped in a blanket someone must have left behind. The fabric smelled faintly of tea and warm sugar. She closed her eyes, not because she was tired, because it felt right. Mr. Isherwood leaned back beside her, one hand resting on his cane, the other folded across his chest. Soon the soft murmur of the thread path faded behind them, and Tavi slipped into sleep, deep, dreamless at first. Then something warmer, a place where time slowed even further until it became feeling. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't sure how long had passed. But the light had changed. The dreams in the air had cleared. And the people in town were waking up, stretching gently, smiling faintly, as if something inside them had moved forward, even if their bodies had not. Mr. Isherwood opened his eyes and nodded. Time well spent. Tavi didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply smiled and watched the morning begin. The next thread glowed rose gold and shimmered faintly with warmth, like the memory of a kind touch. Tavi followed it without question. The thread path was growing more familiar now, not just a route, but a rhythm, one she could feel behind her ribs, where the quiet parts of her thoughts lived. As they stepped through the soft edge of the fog, a town appeared. Nestled between slow hills and flowering trellises, it looked like something from a painting someone might keep beside their bed, just to remember what tenderness feels like. Its name curved around a garden gate. The streets were paved with warm stone, vines wrapped gently around every lamppost. Couples walked slowly, hand in hand, their steps in sync like music you couldn't hear but somehow still knew. And there was something else. The townspeople were all glowing. Not brightly, not obviously, but subtly, a faint shimmer around them like the sun warming glass from the inside. And each glow seemed to match someone else's, somewhere nearby. Tavi whispered, "Why is everyone sparkling?" Mr. Isherwood didn't answer immediately. He nodded toward a wooden bench and they sat. He said softly, "In Amoria, time passes differently for everyone." Tavi leaned in. He continued, "No one here ages by the hour, or by the year. They age only when they fall in love." She blinked. "So they just stay young?" He smiled. "Not quite. Love doesn't just mean romance. It could be the love of a friend, a pet, a morning, a moment." She watched a child laughing in a flower field while an old man with soft eyes watched nearby, smiling. "He must have loved a lot," she said. "Or deeply," Isherwood replied. Tavi's eyes drifted to a pair of women painting a wall together. One had silver hair and bright hands. The other was younger, not by much, but she had a softness to her smile that made time feel like it bent toward her. Tavi sat quietly, then asked, "What happens if you never love?" Mr. Isherwood looked at her with the kind of expression that doesn't rush an answer. "You don't grow," he said. "You stay exactly as you are." Tavi nodded. She didn't know if that sounded sad or safe. They walked through the town together, passing moments that looked like memories already. A man singing softly while trimming roses, a woman fixing a bicycle with her granddaughter, two teens reading poetry on a rooftop with their shoes off, and the world far away. Time here wasn't loud. It wasn't even visible. It was felt, like warmth between joined hands, like a page being turned in a diary just before the next entry. When they returned to the edge of town, the guide in Tavi's pocket pulsed once, not urgently. Just ready. Tavi turned back toward Amoria. Do you think they know? Mr. Isherwood raised an eyebrow. Know what? That they're aging. He gave the smallest smile. I think they know they're living. That's enough. And they stepped forward into the mist once more. This thread was crooked. Not in a broken way, more like it had been drawn by someone while sleepwalking, wandering in loops and curves that didn't seem to lead anywhere, until they did. Tavi followed it with Mr. Isherwood at her side, the guide pulsing a faint lilac glow. It felt light in her pocket, like it barely wanted to disturb the silence. They stepped through the fog into a village of floating platforms and hanging bridges, each house built at a slightly different angle. No two windows matched. No two lanterns glowed with the same light. And everywhere, clocks. Hundreds of them, on roofs, in trees, hanging from wind chimes and tied to fences. But not one of them matched another. Some ticked too fast. Some ticked backward. Some rang at random, laughing bells in the middle of perfect quiet. Tavi paused. Are they broken? Mr. Isherwood shook his head with a soft hum. No, they're personal. She turned to him. This is arrhythmia, he said. A village where every person keeps their own time. She watched as a woman walked across a narrow bridge, completely unbothered by a clock beside her that chimed wildly. Across from her, a man sat on a rocking chair beside a clock with no hands at all. There's no standard here, Isherwood added. No morning rush, no shared deadlines. Everyone simply moves when it feels right. Tavi looked at the villagers. Some strolled, some sat, some danced slowly in doorways. Some hadn't moved at all. How do they meet up? Or talk? Or plan anything? He smiled gently, with patience. They wandered deeper, across a bridge made of soft ropes that swayed in time with a metronome fastened at its center. A boy passed them on a scooter, laughing, as the clock on his back bounced out of rhythm with his feet. He didn't care. No one minded. Tavi stood near a clock that struck once every few seconds, each chime softer than the last. A woman nearby was painting slow circles on a wooden plank. With each chime she added a stroke. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. They never feel late here, Mr. Isherwood said, almost to himself, because time bends toward them, not the other way around. Tavi thought of the school bell back home, the way it told her when to speak, when to eat, when to be finished with something she hadn't started yet. She let out a long breath, and the clock nearest her stopped ticking for one full beat, then started again, just a little slower. She smiled. Maybe even the clocks liked being listened to. The thread they followed this time shimmered silver. Not glowing, reflecting, like moonlight caught on quiet water. As Tavi stepped onto it, she felt something unusual, a tug behind her chest. Not pulling her back, just reminding her of something. Of somewhere. The mist opened to reveal a wide stone path lined with windmills and soft blue glass windows. Each house looked familiar, and yet none matched any Tavi had ever seen. The air had a hum to it, not mechanical, not natural, a sort of layered quiet, like someone whispering in three directions at once. A wooden sign at the edge of the road said only, trifled. Mr. Isherwood paused beside it. One of the strangest, he said softly, and one of the most honest. Tavi looked around. Why is it called that? He gestured forward. Because in Trifold, everything happens at once. She frowned. He smiled. You'll see. They walked slowly through the first square. It looked empty at first. No people. No motion. Then, from the corner of her eye, Tavi caught something. A woman crossing the square. And a child chasing her. And a man standing alone in the same spot. All overlapping. All moving in different ways. And none acknowledging the others. They're all there, Tavi said, voice barely above a breath, but not together. Mr. Isherwood nodded. In Trifold, every moment you've lived, are living and will live. Exists all at once, but only you can feel your version. A soft breeze passed. Tavi turned to see a version of herself, or someone who looked like her, skipping ahead down the next street. But that girl wasn't wearing the same clothes. She was older, a little taller, her hair a bit longer. Is that a version of you, Mr. Isherwood confirmed? One you may become, or remember being, or only dreaming of. Tavi watched silently as the other version of herself turned a corner and disappeared. It wasn't scary. It was peaceful, like catching sight of a reflection in a lake, knowing it isn't you, but knowing it belongs to you anyway. They passed scenes layered like watercolor, a man proposing on a rooftop, a boy practicing a speech to no one, an older woman sitting on a bench holding a flower that hadn't bloomed yet. Tavi stepped toward the woman. She looked up. "You'll understand it later," the woman said softly. Tavi didn't ask what. She just smiled. As they walked toward the edge of Trifold, Miss Isherwood placed a hand on Tavi's shoulder. "This town reminds us," he said, "that our past doesn't leave us. And our future isn't waiting. It's walking beside us. Always." Tavi held that thought gently. And the guide pulsed once. Time to go? But somehow she knew a part of her never left. The thread they followed now pulsed gold and green like sunlight catching the inside of a leaf. Tavi held the guide close as they stepped through the mist and into a town that buzzed with quiet energy. Not fast, not loud, but focused. Everywhere she looked, people were bartering, trading, speaking softly at open stalls. But no one held coins, or bills, or cards. Instead, they held clocks. Small ones, large ones, pocket watches and sundials. Some were strange and homemade, others finely crafted and shimmering with thin gears. Above the main archway, a carved sign read, "Chronoworth trade in time, spend in meaning." Tavi stared. "Is this a market?" Mr. Isherwood nodded. "One of the few where no one buys with gold. Here everything costs time." She looked to the first stall. A man was handing over a tiny clock with blue crystal hands. The vendor accepted it, smiled, and passed him a folded letter sealed in wax. "What was that?" she asked. "An old memory," Mr. Isherwood said. "How much did it cost?" "An hour." Tavi watched as the man held the letter to his chest and walked away, blinking hard, not from sadness, from something deeper. She turned to another booth where a woman offered 2 small clocks for a photograph. At another, a teenager gave away an entire day for a worn guitar string tied to a note that read, "Play this when you forget who you are." Tavi whispered, "Do they get the time back?" "No," said Mr. Isherwood. "Not exactly, but they spend it differently. That's the point." She walked slowly between the booths, heart quiet. A child was trading 10 minutes for a storybook. An older man handed over a week in exchange for a key that didn't open anything. Not yet, anyway. Time here was not something to hoard. It was shared, offered, received. Tavi turned to Mr. Isherwood. "Should we trade something?" He held out a small silver pocket watch. "This one holds 2 hours, if you're ready." She took it in her hands. It ticked softly, not like a countdown, but like breath. She approached a stall where a kind-eyed vendor sat beneath vines of dried herbs and glowing jars. In front of her sat a single folded map. Not the kind you used to get somewhere. The kind that reminded you where you'd been. Tavi set the pocket watch down. The woman handed her the map. Inside was a single phrase written in silver ink. "You gave time to listen. Here's what you heard." Tavi didn't understand it yet. But somehow that was okay. They left without fanfare, their steps lighter than when they'd arrived. Behind them the clocks ticked on, not impatient, not urgent. Just steady. The next thread was almost invisible. It shimmered faintly, like the edge of a shadow just before dusk, never fully seen, always just slipping out of sight. Tavi had to blink several times to keep her focus on it as they followed it into the fog. But on the other side was Velora, a town tucked beneath a crescent moon, its rooftops slanted low as if bowing toward the stars. There were no lanterns in the windows, Instead, soft lights flickered along the walkways, jars of fireflies glowing with sleepy pulses. A wooden sign hung crookedly from an iron pole. It read, "Valora, here while the stars allow." Mr. Isherwood adjusted his coat. "It only appears after nightfall, and only in places where dreams have been left behind." Tavi looked around. The town was quiet but not abandoned. Gentle voices floated on the cool air, people whispering lullabies, telling stories in soft tones, laughing slowly. Everyone here moved with the stillness of sleepwalkers, their eyes half-lidded, their smiles soft and distant. The air smelled like lavender and cooling stone. Tavi followed Mr. Isherwood through winding alleys lit by blue moss that glowed under their feet. It didn't feel spooky. It felt like walking through a hush that had been waiting for them. She asked, "Why don't they live here during the day?" "They can't," he replied. "Valora fades with the light. Every morning it disappears, buildings, trees, even the sky over it." Tavi's eyebrows lifted. "Where does it go?" "No one knows. It's not meant to be studied. Just felt, like a dream." They passed a small square where people lay on cushions and hammocks. Some murmured old stories, others just watched the sky. "Do they sleep?" she asked. "Not quite. They drift." He led her to a small hill above the town. From there they could see the whole of Valora glowing like a constellation fallen to earth. Tavi lay back on the grass. The stars above mirrored the lights below. She thought of places you can't find on maps, of dreams you wake up remembering but not clearly, of feelings that stay even when their details fade. A bell chimed in the distance, low and long. Mr. Isherwood sat beside her. "That's the first warning," he said. "Dawn's not far." Tavi turned her head. "Will we forget it?" "No," he whispered. "Not if we're quiet enough to remember." She closed her eyes for just a moment. And when she opened them, they were standing once again on the thread path. The air was lighter, the fog thinner. Valora was gone, but the scent of lavender still clung faintly to her sleeves. The thread this time was pale silver, nearly white, and so cold to the touch that Tavi felt it even through her sleeve. As she stepped onto it, a flurry of frost spiraled up from her boots like the thread itself had been sleeping under snow. Mr. Isherwood exhaled gently, his breath a slow cloud in the air. They passed into a hush of white. The town was blanketed in snow, the buildings coated with layers of frost that looked like they had been there for decades. Every window was fogged over. Every rooftop bowed beneath weight. The trees stood still as statues. A wooden placard, half frozen and nearly covered in ice, hung from a tilted post. "Pardon." Tavi rubbed her hands together. "It's beautiful, but it feels sad." Mr. Isherwood nodded. "Because it is. Time here is frozen, not from winter, but from unforgiveness." Tavi blinked. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the clock tower at the town's center. Its hands were still, not broken, just unmoved. A delicate frost had formed inside the glass. No one here grows older. Nothing moves forward until someone forgives. She looked around. There were people, quietly sitting on doorsteps, staring into the middle distance. Their eyes were soft but heavy. A woman leaned against a wall, arms crossed, not in anger, but in a kind of gentle waiting. "Forgive who?" Tavi whispered. "Anyone. Anything. Themselves, even. The town responds to the act, not the reason." She watched a man across the square. He sat beside a frozen fountain, hands wrapped around a thick scarf, unmoving. Then slowly he opened a letter. "Read it once." Then again. And with a single breath, he whispered something to the empty air. The frost on the fountain cracked, just slightly, and a trickle of water slipped free beneath the ice. One small drop. Tavi turned to Mr. Isherwood. "They're not stuck. They're waiting." He nodded. "And healing is slow, but every step forward is counted." They walked together toward the clock tower. The air was heavy, but not cold enough to bite, just cold enough to feel thoughtful. A child waved at Tavi from a window. When she waved back, the frost on the glass began to clear. Tiny moments. Tiny thawings. They didn't stay long. Pardon wasn't meant for travelers. It was a place for those who needed time to begin again. As they stepped back onto the thread path, Tavi looked once more at the frozen town. Not as something broken, but something unfolding. And she held the silence gently. This thread wound upward. It didn't shimmer like the others. It climbed, curling like smoke, like breath in winter. As Tavi and Mr. Isherwood followed it, the mist gave way to narrow stone paths and cool air rising off the mountainside. The town waited high above the clouds. They stepped into it at the first blush of twilight, when the sky was the color of ink soaked in lavender. A wooden sign hung crooked above a carved staircase. Ever still, one more time, every time. The town was beautiful. Quietly so. Worn bricks, lanterns strung between houses, gardens that had clearly been tended with care. But what stood out most were the people. They were walking through the evening with the calmness of those who'd lived it all before. Because they had. Mr. Isherwood nodded to the town square. Every night when the stars arrive, ever still resets. Back to morning, everything rewinds except memory. Tavi blinked. So they remember what they did, but it starts over? Exactly. Why? So they can choose differently. A baker offered fresh rolls from a cart. A man passed, shaking his head gently. "No, thank you," he said. "I took one yesterday, and it made me late." Tavi smiled. "That seems useful." Mr. Isherwood chuckled. "It is, but it's also tender. Everstill isn't for fixing things. It's for learning from them." She watched two friends at a fountain. One offered an apology. The other smiled, nodded. No big scene, just a soft, shared understanding. They might have argued yesterday, Isherwood added, but they remembered what it cost. Tavi took a seat beside a tree near the edge of a garden. A girl her age sat nearby, threading blue beads onto a wire. "First time here?" the girl asked. Tavi nodded. The girl grinned. "Took me 12 mornings to get this pattern right, but it's better every time." Tavi glanced at the horizon. What happens if someone wants to move on? "They do," the girl said. "Once they've done what they came for. The town lets them go." As night deepened, a soft bell rang, deep and warm. The air shifted, and slowly the town grew brighter. Not darker. Morning again. The same day, but already changed. Mr. Isherwood gestured to the thread path, now glowing faintly beneath the garden gate. Time to go. Tavi followed, glancing back one last time at the baker, already setting out rolls with a new kind of smile. "Do they ever get tired of repeating things?" she asked. "Only when they stop noticing how far they've come," Isherwood replied. And with that, they stepped into the mist once more. The thread curved downward, smooth and slow, as if descending into thought. Mist parted to reveal open sky and a shoreline that shimmered like starlight scattered on stone. The town was nestled between cliffs, the sea curling in quiet rhythm against the rocks. No clock tower, no hour hands, just the sound of waves and wind and the distant echo of song. A sign carved in driftwood and worn smooth by salt read, "Lyrian where the hours sing." Tavi stepped forward, boots crunching softly on crushed shells. The air smelled of brine and old stories. Above, gulls circled lazily, their calls blending with something else, deeper, slower. A hum. No, a song. It came from the ocean. Mr. Isherwood closed his eyes, listening. "They say the whales mark the passing of time here." Tavi turned to him wide-eyed. "Really?" He nodded. "Each season begins with a different call. Each tide brings a new rhythm. The people here know when to plant, to gather, to rest, all by listening." They walked through the village, homes shaped like shells and sails, curved into the cliffs. Children traced spiral patterns into the sand. Elderly folks sat quietly on benches facing the sea, humming along with the deep, slow tones that rolled in with the tide. Tavi stood at the edge of a pier and stared out at the open water. A long, distant call echoed, so low it trembled through the boards beneath her feet. "That one," said a man nearby, "means it's time to begin things." He smiled gently, his eyes crinkling. Some of us will start new paintings tonight, others will open long-forgotten letters. One couple's getting married, I think. Tavi looked back at Mr. Isherwood. Do they ever get impatient? He chuckled. They know that anything that needs rushing probably doesn't need keeping. She nodded, letting the thought sink like a pebble into her chest. Later, as the sun slipped behind the sea, the town began to glow, not with fire, but with soft lanterns lit by the wind. The people gathered quietly, facing the waves. And the song came again. This time longer, lower, almost like a lullaby. Tavi closed her eyes. The wind brushed her cheek like a page turning. She felt no urge to move, only to be. Mr. Isherwood stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the railing. They don't count the minutes here, he said. They count the meanings. And that night, as the thread path returned like a ribbon of tide washing ashore, they stepped onto it, gently, slowly, carrying the song with them. The thread they followed this time smelled faintly of soil and rain. It curled like a vine rather than a line, winding through the mist with lazy arcs and gentle loops. As Tavi stepped onto it, she noticed her boots leaving faint green footprints behind, vanishing just as quickly. The fog parted to reveal a vast forest. Sunlight spilled in golden shafts through tall trees, whose leaves shimmered in colors not usually found in nature. Peach, lavender, sky blue, and in the center of a glade, a village built among flowers and tree roots. Its name was carved into a mossy stone. Florinel, where days are grown? Tavi stepped carefully onto the soft, flower-covered path. Between homes shaped like greenhouses and cottages wrapped in ivy, people knelt in gardens, each one different, each one uniquely tended. Mr. Isherwood inhaled deeply. This is where time blooms. She turned to him. In Florinel, every person is given a plot of earth. Their time grows there. Every memory, every experience, it becomes a flower, a vine, a seed. Tavi looked around. One woman's garden was a soft swirl of sunflowers and soft lavender that swayed even when there was no wind. A young man was carefully pruning a tangle of bright blue blossoms that opened and closed in slow rhythm like breathing. A child gently watered a glassy bulb that glowed with an inner light. Tavi whispered, "Are they planting the future?" Mr. Isherwood smiled, and tending the past. A gentle figure in overalls approached her and offered a seed in a small wooden cup. "For your journey," they said with a kind smile. Tavi looked at the seed. It shimmered faintly between her fingers. She wasn't sure what kind of moment it would become. But that didn't matter. In Florinel, every seed would grow. If not today, then someday. And not the same way for any two people. She and Mr. Isherwood wandered through rows of memories in bloom, one garden full of laughter-shaped marigolds, another with deep crimson vines that hummed gently with music. "Some flowers grow from joy," he said softly. "Some from grief, some from both." Tavi touched the petal of a sleepy orange blossom. It curled gently around her fingertip. And she felt a moment from her childhood, not the memory exactly, but the feeling of it. Warmth. Safety. Belonging. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the path ahead shimmered again. The thread path. It was time to leave. But her pocket was heavier now, with one small seed, and the promise of time yet to grow. The thread was nearly weightless. Tavi noticed it as soon as they stepped on. Her boots didn't press it down. It shimmered with pale gold ripples, and every so often it twitched beneath their feet like it was ticklish. The fog around them rose like bubbles, and when it cleared, they were above the world. A city floated among the clouds, soft stone bridges arched from one puff of land to another, suspended by massive balloons, sky kites, and airy currents. Birds flitted through the air lazily. Sunlight sparkled off glass domes filled with gardens and music. A driftwood sign hung on 2 kite strings. "Skylore, where time laughs with you." Tavi could already hear it. Laughter. Not wild, not loud, but gentle, musical, rising and falling in the air like a breeze. People all around were chatting softly, some giggling, others doubled over in shared delight. Every building had wind chimes or hollow bells. Each time someone laughed, the closest bell rang, and somewhere overhead, a giant clock spun a tiny degree forward. Tavi grinned. Time here moves when people laugh? Mr. Isherwood chuckled. Exactly. In Skylore, laughter powers the hours. No laughter, no movement. Tavi spun slowly in place, watching a group of children play a game with glowing bubbles. Each time one popped, a bell rang. A woman sat at a cloud-shaped cafe table, sipping tea and giggling with a friend about something scribbled on a napkin. Does sadness stop the clock? Tavi asked softly. Mr. Isherwood shook his head. No, but they don't give it more than it deserves. Pain is acknowledged, then released like a balloon. What's kept is the joy that follows. Tavi liked that. She liked it very much. They sat for a while at a floating bench shaped like a paper airplane. Below them, the soft bell of a joke tolled too perfectly sent a ripple through the clouds. Every so often, a floating orb would pass by. It looked like a tiny sun filled with echoes. If she listened closely, she could hear... Then I said, "That's not a teacup, that's my boot." Laughter. Rings of silver. Time gently inching forward. Tavi turned to Mr. Isherwood, grinning. They must live a long time. They live exactly as long as they laugh, he said. Some forever. As the thread path shimmered into view again, this time floating horizontally across a glowing cloud, Tavi looked back at Skylore. Her heart felt a little lighter, and she swore just as they stepped forward she heard a new chime, clear, warm, and familiar. It was her own laugh. Still echoing. Still counting. This thread led downward. It curled like smoke drifting into a well, silent and slow. As Tavi and Mr. Isherwood stepped into the mist, the air cooled, thickened, and darkened. Not ominously, but gently. Like dusk was settling beneath the earth instead of above it. The thread vanished into a great wooden door built into a hillside. Carved above it were words in a language she didn't know, but somehow understood. Velsada, the Library of Still Time. Inside, the air was hushed. Not silent. Just reverent. The passageway opened into a vast underground chamber, lit by glowing moss and slow-burning lanterns. Shelves lined the walls, but not with books, with jars. Thousands of them, some small as thimbles, others the size of lanterns. Each one contained a shimmer of something glowing softly inside. Tavi leaned close to one. Inside, the glow pulsed once every few seconds. A heartbeat. A second. A moment. Mr. Isherwood whispered beside her, "These are stored hours, collected during silence, kept safe underground." Tavi's voice came out softer than she meant. Stored from where? Above, from the world. Every time someone sits in true silence. No noise, no thought too loud. That time is gathered. Placed here? For when the world forgets how to be still. A woman in long robes passed them, carrying a tray of jars. She moved without hurry, without pause. Tavi touched a jar. It was warm. Inside it, she saw something strange. A boy sitting by a tree with his eyes closed, holding nothing, listening to birds. She looked up. Are these memories? Mr. Isherwood nodded. Not sights, feelings. Stored time isn't about what happened. It's about how it felt to be quiet. They wandered deeper into the vault. Jars glowed with soft blue, golden peach, pale violet. The farther they walked, the slower everything seemed. Even their steps. Even their thoughts. In the center of the room was a great stone bowl. Around it, 5 elders sat in silence. Occasionally, one would lift a jar and open it, and a soft breeze would ripple out, carrying a stillness that made the entire room pause. Why do they open them? Tavi asked. To remind the world what it's forgotten, Isherwood replied. Sometimes the noise above gets too loud. When it does, they open time here and send the stillness back up. Tavi stood beside the stone bowl. And for the first time on their journey, she said nothing. Not because there was nothing to say, but because she could feel, in every part of her, that listening was more powerful than speaking here. And the jar beside her glowed a little brighter. Later, as they ascended the passage once more, the air warmed, the silence lifted, and the thread path waited like a soft ribbon laid across the hillside. Tavi looked back once, then closed her eyes. And for just a moment, the world stood still. The thread this time shimmered with the colors of dusk, soft lavender, warm amber, the blue of a sky not quite finished with day, but already letting go of light. Tavi stepped forward, and with each footfall she felt a subtle change, like walking into a memory. The mist parted slowly, and there it was, a village caught in permanent twilight. Neither night nor day. Shadows were long but not dark. Light came from nowhere in particular, but it glowed warmly on every surface. There were no lamps, no sun, just a gentle in-between. A worn stone marker near the path read, "Duswin, where one moment waits." Tavi took a few steps into the village and felt it immediately. The same sounds, the same movements, the same moment repeating. A man across the way picked up a dropped scarf, smiled, handed it back. A child tripped, caught themselves, giggled. A woman looked at a letter in her hands, sighed, and folded it once more. Then again. Then again. The scene around her was looping, not exactly frozen, not hurried, just paused in repetition. She turned to Mr. Isherwood. "Why is everyone stuck?" "They're not stuck," he replied. "They're living the moment they haven't yet understood." Tavi looked around again. "So they keep repeating it?" He nodded. "Until they see it differently. Until they choose a new way forward." A man sat near a window, always looking at the same photograph. Each time the loop restarted, he blinked slower. Each time he set the photo down a little more gently. Across the square, a young girl walked toward a door, stopped, walked again, stopped. Tavi stepped beside her during one of the pauses. "What are you waiting for?" she asked. The girl whispered, "For the right words." Then she tried again, and the moment repeated. Tavi stepped back, heart full of something both soft and strong. "Do they know?" Mr. Isherwood's voice was quiet. "Some do. Others only feel it, that something is unfinished, that something wants to be healed." The village bell rang. Once, then once again. Then again. But each time it sounded slightly different, not in tone, but in meaning. Like it was trying on new ways to be heard. Tavi and Mr. Isherwood walked through the village until they reached the other side, where the thread path shimmered like the last light of day caught on water. Tavi turned back once, watching the woman with the letter. This time she opened it, and this time she smiled. Just a little. The light around her deepened, and the moment changed. The thread wound low again, this time over water. Gentle waves lapped at its edges, and seabirds drifted overhead in wide circles. As they crossed, the scent changed, salt, citrus, vanilla, and something deeper like spices wrapped in memory. Tavi smiled before she saw anything. "It smells like someone's cooking." Mr. Isherwood nodded. "That's how you know you're near Flavriel." A small island emerged through the mist, shaped like a curled comma, a pause in the sea. Narrow stone paths wove through cottages made of driftwood and painted coral, and gardens overflowed with herbs and wild fruit. At the docks, a small sign swayed gently, "Flavriel, where every taste tells time." The moment they stepped ashore, a breeze carried the scent of roasted plums, peppered honey, and warm milk steeped in something sweet. Tavi's stomach gave a small rumble. Mr. Isherwood chuckled. "Common side effect. Time here is measured in flavor. No clocks, no calendars, only meals." They passed through the main square, where people sat on floor cushions and benches made of woven kelp and driftwood. In the center stood a great open kitchen, where smoke curled from clay ovens, and soft laughter mingled with the bubbling of pots. A woman with silver braids and spice-dusted fingers handed Tavi a tiny tart. "First taste is always the most honest," she said with a wink. Tavi bit into it, and immediately she was standing beneath the apricot tree in her grandmother's yard. The air thick with summer, a song on the wind, and the weightless feeling of being small and safe. When she opened her eyes, she was back in Flavriel. Mr. Isherwood smiled. Time here comes in bites. The right flavor brings back a moment you forgot mattered. Tavi touched her chest. It felt so real. It was for a breath. They wandered past stalls offering delicate teas that shimmered with color, warm breads filled with memories of first meetings, and candies that tasted like a goodbye, said too softly. People sipped, tasted, smiled, cried. No one rushed. Because in Flavriel you didn't move on until the flavor changed, and the moment with it. Tavi sipped from a small blue cup and saw her father's old workshop. The way he used to whistle when he didn't know she was listening. She smiled, then cried, then smiled again. As the tide shifted, a soft bell rang, not to signal time, but to stir a new batch of stew. Mr. Isherwood touched the edge of the guide. The path waits when you're full. And this time she was, not with food, but with feeling. She left Flavriel with a lingering sweetness on her tongue and a warmth in her heart that hadn't been there before. The thread this time ran straight up. It was steep, steeper than any before, winding like a staircase of light through the fog. Tavi climbed slowly, breathing in thin, cold air that sharpened her thoughts. Around her, clouds thinned into sunlight and the sky unfolded in all directions. At last, the fog cleared to reveal a mountaintop, not sharp or jagged, but smooth as if shaped by wind and time into a cradle. A great clock tower stood at its center, tall and silver, crowned with open platforms. And at its base, carved in weather-worn stone, Virel where every first time moves the world. Tavi looked around. The town was small, a cluster of homes and workshops scattered in rings around the tower, their chimneys puffing like slow heartbeats. But there was something unusual. Time didn't tick here. Leapt. She watched as a boy at a wood-carving bench picked up a new tool, one he'd never dared to try. The moment he made his first cut, a loud clang echoed from the tower, and the minute hand jerked forward. A girl on a rooftop took a breath and sang a note into the wind. Another clang. The clock jumped again. Mr. Isherwood gestured gently. Time here only moves when someone does something new. Tavi whispered, You mean when they're brave? Exactly. First steps, first risks, first truth spoken aloud. Tavi watched a woman take a new trail through the forest gate. A man tried dancing alone in his yard. A pair of children poured color into a fountain that had always been gray. And each time, clang, 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 the clock moved. Not slowly, not fast, but with certainty, with meaning. Tavi looked down at her hands. What if you're afraid? Mr. Isherwood gave a kind smile. Then time waits with you. It never punishes stillness, but it celebrates movement. She walked through the village, thinking. Past the painter holding a blank canvas. Past the baker trying salt instead of sugar. Past the man learning to apologize with his hands instead of words. At the edge of the cliff she stood alone. The wind was strong. The sky felt endless. And then, with both feet, she stepped onto a narrow beam of stone that jutted into the sky. Just one step. Her heart pounded. Clang. The clock tower's bell rang out, bright and full. And Tavi felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear. Not pride. Just becoming. As they descended once more onto the thread path, she turned back and watched the minute hand on the clock tower roll forward once more, even though no one else had moved. Because her step still counted. The thread ahead was strange, shifting gently, like it wasn't sure if it was meant to move forward or back. Each step Tavi took made her feel lighter, as though gravity was letting go just a little. The fog softened into velvet night. And then, without warning, they stepped into a town built like a dream. Houses floated slightly above the ground. Roads twisted into staircases, then turned back into roads. Lights glowed from within trees, and benches hovered in the air like thoughts that hadn't landed. A sign, carved into glass that shimmered with stars, read, Revel, where time sleeps in reverse. Tavi stepped carefully. Everything felt quiet, not from silence, but from stillness, the kind that exists in deep sleep. A soft humming came from all directions. People wandered gently, eyes half-lidded, their motions dreamed slow. Mr. Isherwood adjusted his coat. In Revel, he said, time moves backward while you sleep. Not in minutes or hours, but in memory. Tavi tilted her head. What do? They dream their way back through their own days. Sometimes years, sometimes lifetimes. Why? To revisit, to relearn, to forgive, to feel something more fully. She noticed a woman lying in a hammock of mist, smiling faintly in her sleep. Next to her, a glowing ribbon floated in the air, showing flickers of memory, a birthday candle, a shared dance, the face of someone long gone. Each time the woman dreamed deeper, the ribbon unwound, and time ticked in reverse. You can't stay here awake, Mr. Isherwood said. To experience Revel, you must sleep. Tavi found a soft place beneath a tree with golden leaves. The ground was warm, the air was cool. She lay down, closed her eyes, and the moment she did, time slipped backward. She saw herself younger, running through a field, writing her name in the condensation on a window, watching her grandfather tie knots in a rope and explain how each one had a name. She felt not sadness but presence, like being gifted those moments again, just to hold. Somewhere nearby a bell rang, slowly, like it was remembering how. And then softly Tavi opened her eyes. She was still under the tree. Mr. Isherwood sat beside her, a cup of warm tea in his hands. Did I? She asked. He nodded. You remembered. The thread path shimmered ahead, curling upward through floating steps made of light and soft blue stone. Tavi stood, not sleepy, not rushed. Just peaceful. She stepped forward, carrying time not in her hands, but in her breath. The thread ahead looked like a ripple of heat. It shimmered on the air, rising from the earth in waves. As Tavi and Mr. Isherwood stepped forward, the world around them began to shift. Greens faded into golds, and the wind took on a low, whispering voice. The fog blew away like dust caught on breath. And there it was. A desert stretched wide and quiet, its dunes curved like sleeping giants. Nestled within them, almost invisible at first, was a scattering of clay homes and sandstone spires, half-buried, sun-warmed, humming with stillness. A hand-carved sign leaned slightly against a post, half-covered in sand. Narrated, where time waits to be listened to. Tavi shaded her eyes as they entered. There were no clocks, no sounds of bells, just wind and something underneath it. A low pulsing, a rhythm too slow to notice unless you really listened. She turned to Mr. Isherwood. Is it hidden? He smiled. No, just quiet. Time here doesn't show itself until you stop moving long enough to hear it. They passed a group of villagers seated in a circle around a flat stone. No one spoke. They simply waited. After several minutes, one of them smiled, a small, content smile, and placed a hand on the sand. And the sand responded. A small spiral appeared beneath her fingers, glowing faintly, turning slowly. She found a moment, Mr. Isherwood said softly. Tavi watched in awe as another person reached into the spiral and pulled out a small object, not gold or stone, but something softer. A folded slip of cloth, aged but meaningful. A memory, maybe. A reminder. Everyone buries time differently, he continued. In Narrated, they listen for it, like listening for your own heartbeat in the stillness. Tavi sat down beside one of the dunes and placed both hands into the sand. Warm, fine. Like time itself, impossible to hold tightly. She closed her eyes. List. Here is the continuation of Part 22 of the Clockmaker's Atlas, completing the quiet moment in Narrated, where stillness reveals what the ticking world often hides.